If somebody could prove to me that Stoicism was wrong, I would gladly reject it. I'm after the truth, and the truth never hurt anybody. What is the hardest thing you can do without getting upset about it? And that is I think that's an important value. I think that's an important thing to be able to do. And the example I give out, like healthy stoicism, is like, yeah, somebody needs to put the dog down because the dog's sick. The things that are not up to you, you should practice detachment from. The things that are up to you, you should practice attachment towards.
My North Star here is my son is cut down in front of my eyes, and I just shrug my shoulders.
Yeah. That's the goal, right? That's the ideal.
Hello, and welcome back to Horseshoe Theory, the only podcast that is both pessimaxed and optimaxed. In today's episode, we have Michael Tremblay. Michael Tremblay is a Stoic philosopher. He has a Ph.D. in philosophy where he studied Stoic ethics and education. He's currently working on a Stoic meditation app that combines mindfulness practice and Stoic theory. He also co-hosts the Stoic Conversations podcast, where he talks about all things Stoicism and self-improvement through philosophy. You see, here's the thing. Me and Greg are quite vocal opponents of Stoicism. We both see it as a misapplied cope to be alone, to not have friends, and to be a psychopath. Michael sees it as one of the most valuable philosophies ever created. There's a bit of an audio issue on my mic near the beginning for the first 20 minutes, but I barely talk, so it's not that big of a deal, and it corrects itself later on. Sit back, relax, ignore all your obligations, friends, family, and the fact you have $0 in your bank account, and listen to me, Greg, and Michael Tremblay debate the value of Stoicism.
Do you know why you're here?
I'm here to talk about Stoicism and maybe something else. I don't know.
We misled you. You asked us before this started, you're like, why me? Why talk about Stoicism, right? Why do we want you here? The answer is because we hate Stoicism.
Oh, no. That's actually really exciting because I love Stoicism.
Mm-hmm. We complain about Stoicism all the time. We complain about Stoics. We complain about the philosophy. We complain about the Stoic YouTube channels that show up. How to disregard women. And it's like a big buff Stoic guy with an AI generated voice.
Well, that's not great. Yeah.
So it's on you to defend the entire perspective in the following hour and a half.
I feel really well prepared to do that, actually. Like, that sounds really exciting.
Okay.
I'm excited. I'm making a video on this actually actively. I've been writing for a while about this, so I'm very excited to hear like the genuine long form perspective on this.
That's what I'm here for.
Good. I'm glad. You're taking this very stoically.
It's too late now. I can't leave anymore. So,
should we begin with an introduction? You have a PhD. You have a podcast. You're a Stoic guy. You're well equipped to talk about Stoicism. If we wanted someone to steelman the case for Stoicism, we couldn't have picked a better option, really.
Yeah. So a little bit about me. I have my PhD in Stoicism, so I have like an academic background. I also consider myself a practicing Stoic. I think that is the philosophy that I live by. I always say, I get in some debates where I think maybe sometimes I'm more of an Aristotelian, but I think at that point you're pretty far into it anyway, and I don't think that's that important of a distinction. So I have the academic background, so I kind of like get familiar with the Stoicism. I also have an app called Stoa and a podcast called Stoa Conversations where we talk about practicing Stoicism. So we talk about putting Stoicism into practice, living as a Stoic, and the challenges or the clarifications about some of the more confusing parts of that. So that's a bit about me. I've always been attracted to, I would say, philosophies as a way of life. Even when I got into philosophy grad school, is because I thought philosophy was a way to help you live better. Mm-hmm. And I saw Stoicism as the school that had the best answer to that so far, at least.
The most pragmatic?
I think the truest.
The truest.
Pragmatic.
Okay.
Yeah, pragmatic is about what is effective. My understanding of pragmatism is it's about what's effective given a position you've adopted. So, I want to maximize pleasure. I want to maximize happiness. Now, what's the most pragmatic way to do that? I see Stoicism as being true.
Okay. Here, Brogan and I will explain what we think Stoicism is.
Now you straw man it. And then we'll...
Okay. I think Stoicism is when you are alone in your room and all these terrible things are happening and you're just coping by being like, well, it's out of my control. And you're using it as an excuse to not get involved with the world around you and feel pain. I'm a guy that feels pain all the time. I'm pessimaxed. I'm neurotipilled. I am trying to cause myself as much pain at all times as possible. I think as poorly as possible about everything to cause myself most mental anguish. And that's the way I think everyone should live. I think everyone should be pessimaxed. Brogan, what's your take on Stoicism?
I'm romantimaxed. I'm optimaxed.
Yeah.
I think that the attachment to others and the world around you is what imbues your life with meaning.
Cool.
And I think to at least, to misapply how easy it is to misapply the tenets of Stoicism to basically explain the suffering of your life away and just like cope with it. To be like, well, I have no friends, and that's just the will of the universe, and therefore I am not going to fight for my own happiness or my own life. I'm just going to accept my position in the great chain of being. Seems like a very depressing path to take in life.
Brogan's a guy that hates a slave morality. He really hates when someone's just kind of lying around. This is his main critique of the right, is like they blame these forces outside of their control. Oh, Kamala AI'd her crowds or whatever. I have no control over my life because of the Dems or the deep state or the Jews or whatever. It's like, no, why don't you fight? Why don't you try your hardest to make things happen? So all this to say, your turn.
Well, you didn't really explain what Stoicism is. You explained your criticisms, well, not your criticisms, I guess positions that you see as being contrasted to it.
This is how we see it manifest, yeah.
I think that's totally fair. So I want you to direct me, because I get like a accuracy knob that I can turn up or down. So we can go full academic and we can turn it down. But basically there's the distinction between what Stoicism actually is as an intellectual tradition. And there is then Stoicism's reception in the current cultural moment, which is influenced and formed by what Stoicism actually is, but is obviously a mirror image of that, in some way, a reflection of that, and not an accurate representation of that, right? And I see my entire project as bridging the gap, is taking the people that are applying Stoicism incorrectly in a way that is not beneficial, but are somehow attracted to it or think it's interesting, and trying to say, well, this is actually what it means. This is actually what it's about. And this is why it's beneficial. And so I guess it's important for me to make that distinction, because I agree that the current internet reception or current cultural reception of Stoicism can be bad. It's not always bad. It's how many people discover it, but it can be very, very bad for the reasons you raised. But I don't think those things apply to Stoicism as an actual philosophy of life correctly understood. So I just want to it's just like, which are we criticizing? Because one, I'll get on board, or I might disagree a bit, but I'll get on board. And the other, I think we need to get into the nuance of what it actually is.
I would like to get into the nuance of it, because I've read Meditations.
Yeah, great.
Letters from a Stoic, and the little Epictetus.
Yeah, the handbook.
The handbook. Yeah. That's about it, and then just internet research for the video I've been doing. So like a little bit into the history of like the Stoa, and who was the guy whose ship crashed and he was trained by.
Yeah, that was Zeno.
Zeno, yes.
As the founder of Stoicism, yeah.
Yeah. So like I know roughly, I know the timeline and the main figures and the main works of the main figures, but I just see it. I'd love to see your answer to like why you feel like it's misapplied.
Yeah, so I feel like it's misapplied. Okay, so I think the reason Stoicism is misapplied comes back to the thing we were talking about, which is a pragmatic approach, which is to say, I am feeling something and I want to alleviate that feeling, and I'm going to find the psychological or the philosophical system that is going to allow me to alleviate that feeling. And that is a pragmatic approach. But Stoicism's core, again, we should probably get into it at some point. Stoicism's core philosophy is to live in accordance with nature, which I think is most easily understood as living in accordance with the truth. So it's about the pursuit of the truth, right? And Marcus Aurelius has this great line. So Marcus Aurelius, for those listening, if they're not familiar, he was emperor of Rome. He wrote his Meditations, was essentially a journal to himself. And it's this historically interesting piece of work because he was an emperor, but it was also very personal, but he was also an advanced Stoic practitioner. So his Meditations is one of the famous Stoic books. And in Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, he says this thing which is, if somebody could prove to me that Stoicism was wrong, I would gladly reject it. I'm after the truth, and the truth never hurt anybody. And that's the way that I feel about my practice of Stoicism. And so I think when somebody, so, you were talking about optimaxing. I don't know if that's a real thing, but this idea of like, oh, I'm connected with people, but that hurts. So I'm going to now not connect with people. That is somebody actually not making a Stoic decision, which is about the truth of the matter. That's somebody saying, well, how can I maximize pleasure and minimize pain? And the Stoics would say that's actually an Epicurean response. And they don't like the Epicureans either. They think the Epicureans got it wrong, right?
Epicureanism is like hedonism?
It's hedonism, yeah. It's the first ancient Greek form of hedonism. So it's about the maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. And the hedonists say, well, it just so happens that to be a good person also makes you the happiest. Like it has the most pleasure and the least amount of pain. Being a good, because you don't feel guilty, you don't feel regretful, you're not worried somebody's going to come get revenge. But that's ultimately, they end up at this idea that you should be a good person just as a pragmatic argument. They are just about maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain, which the Stoics just criticize. They're not about that.
Okay, but here's a guy that sought the truth and and wanted to act right. A little special guy, Jesus Christ, and he felt a lot of pain. He was crucified.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
Well, I think Stoics have no issue with feeling pain. That Stoicism's not about minimizing pain.
Right, but like if I follow the Stoic lifestyle, if I follow the true lifestyle, that might lead to a lot of pain, which I could avoid if I have all these copes in my head.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the Stoic answer would be that you're okay. Can I explain Stoicism properly?
Yes, we probably should have started with that.
So Stoicism is an ancient Greek philosophy of life. Ancient Greek philosophies of life after Aristotle all have something in common, which is they all think that ethics. Contemporary ethics can be about these questions of like, minute clarifications on what's the best way to act in these kind of ethical dilemmas. You think of something like the trolley problem or utilitarianism, or how should we arrange ourselves politically and things like this. Ancient Greek philosophy tended to be about how to live a good life. So it was the question of what is the best way to live, which I don't know. If we're not interested in that question, then it's like, I think we can have a discussion, but it's like, that's just, for me, is just the most interesting question.
Right. So axiomatically, how to live a good life.
Yeah. Like, what does it mean to be a good life? And Aristotle had this point about like, everybody, if you ask anybody why enough times, they always get to this bedrock, because I want to be happy, right? It's just like, well, why are you filming a podcast? Well, because I think it's intellectually interesting. I enjoy, your company. Well, why do you do things that are intellectually interesting? Oh, because I want to be a kind of person that has interesting thoughts. Why? Because I want to be happy. It's like you get back far enough. And so Aristotle was about, what does that actually mean to be happy? What is that like for a human to be happy? What does that mean to have a good life? Different schools had different answers. Epicureanism, we already said, about maximizing pleasure, minimizing pain. Stoics was about living virtuously. So we can unpack that a bit, but living virtuously meant to be the kind of thing a human should be. So it is grounded in teleology. It is grounded in this idea that human beings have a certain function. There's a better or worse way to be. And because we are rational creatures, we are distinctly intelligent. The best way to be is to be somebody that has knowledge, that lives in accordance with the truth, that understands the way the world is and acts in accordance with it. That is the goal of Stoicism. It so happens that life is going to have not as much pain as other kind of lives, because many of the times we're unhappy, it's because we believe things that aren't true. Sorry, we think, everybody hates us, or if this doesn't go the way I want it to, my life is over. Or, we get really anxious because we give things more value than they need, or we're surprised when bad things happen. I didn't expect a family member to pass away. And the Stoics would respond to something like this, well, you were living out of accordance with nature. You should expect death to happen. You should expect people to pass away because people are mortal. And so that's why it can numb us to kinds of pain, but it numbs us to kinds of pains that don't correspond with the truth. Now, can I keep going, or do you want to?
Well, yeah, you probably should keep going, but let me just say, I think while you were talking, I realized I thought I was an anti-Stoic, but I'm actually an anti-Epicurean.
Yeah, there we go.
In the sense that I'm trying to maximize pain and minimize pleasure for myself.
You're not, you're like a reverse.
Yeah, Epicurean. Yeah. So this was good to sort that out for me.
I'm glad I could help. So the Stoics, in Stoic emotions, we can get into the theory of emotions because it's interesting. But the Stoic theory of emotions basically is that we want to eliminate passions. Okay, people are like, wow, okay, that's so boring, it's not exciting. But for the Stoics, they had a technical definition to passions. Passions were the extreme emotions that come from false beliefs. So they were totally fine with good feelings. So, if I have friendship, it's a genuine friendship and I love that person, I'm allowed to feel happy because I love that person. That's a real thing. If I'm infatuated with somebody, I meet a woman and I think, wow, this is the best person ever. We barely know each other, but this is going to be the love of my life. That kind of love sickness, that's a passion. It doesn't correspond to reality. And that's the dangerous thing. And those are the kinds of dangerous emotions we're looking to eliminate. And so that's why a Stoic ends up with a much more smooth type of life, because they've eliminated the extremes, ups and downs that come from unrealistic ways of thinking about the world.
So I'm heartbroken right now.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And I feel this pain every 30 seconds about the pain in my heart. And should I not feel this?
So there's different kinds of should, right? So in one sense, would the ideal person feel this? No. Would the best person feel this? No. So you are not those things.
I'm the worst guy. Everybody hates me.
But then there's also this idea of should, which is something that I talk about in the Stoicism community. People think, they learn this and they think, oh, I should snap my fingers and I should not be angry anymore. Or I should immediately not feel these things because the Stoics teach these are wrong things to feel. And that's just not a realistic conception of human development. It's not what the Stoics thought, and it's not true, even if it was what the Stoics thought, right? The Stoics make these analogies to self-development and exercise and physical fitness, right? And it's about, you have to develop a practice, you have to develop a routine, and you develop yourself over time the same way you develop your body. So when you say, I'm a runner, should I be able to do a marathon under 3 hours? There's just different conceptions of should we're talking about there, right? Like, should you be able to do it now if you don't run? No. Should you be able to do it if you became a great runner? Yes.
But my North Star here is my son is cut down in front of my eyes, and I just shrug my shoulders.
Yeah. That's the goal, right? But that's the ideal. And so to shrug your shoulders is weird, right? Like, you're building some stuff into that. Epictetus has this line where he says, when you tuck your child in at night, kiss them on the head and say, you too will die. And people love to rip on that one.
Yeah.
And because it's funny, right? But it is this idea of, again, living in accordance with nature, living in accordance with the truth. It's this idea that what it means to love somebody is to understand what they are. It's to love them authentically. The same way if you loved, I could go back to the romantic example. If you go on a date with a girl and you put her on a pedestal in your head and you're not really loving her, right? You're like loving the idea of her, you're idealizing her. It's not really love. So if you have your child and you were saying, I love you insofar as you are never going to die, or insofar as you will die after me, so I don't have to deal with the stress of that. There's something actually kind of inauthentic or less authentic about that love, in my opinion. Epictetus provides another example, since you're talking about sons being cut down. And Epictetus, for those listening, because this is not a Stoicism podcast all the time. So he was a teacher of Stoicism. That's actually who I have my PhD in, is Epictetus. I did my PhD on his educational system, and he was a former slave. He was freed from slavery, educated, and opened up a school of Stoic philosophy. So he has all these funny lines where he refers to his students as slaves, and it's got this like extra kick to it and this punch to it, because it's got the irony if he's educating these wealthy Roman young men and calling them slaves compared to him. But Epictetus has this other passage where he talks about, he meets this politician who's run away from home. Why have you run away from home? Well, I've run away from home because my daughter's sick and I'm kind of just freaking out. I cannot handle it. I'm having this emotional breakdown. Like my wife's just going to deal with it. I can't handle it. And Epictetus is like, basically he's like, what kind of love is this, right? Like, what kind of love are you showing your daughter? Because you are not mentally able to handle the possibility of her death, you are not able to show up for her when she needs it. You're not able to fulfill your role as a father. Mm-hmm. And so we can dunk on the idea of like, your son being cut down and you're, I don't care. I'm shrugging my shoulders. I'm going to get my groceries. And there's something funny to it. Mm-hmm. I totally agree. But that is, that to me is, I think that's right. I'm compelled by it. I don't know if you two.
I want my mom to cry. What do you think?
I think there's some beauty in attachment. I always saw grief as an expression of love. Mm-hmm. True grief, where it's not suffering per se, right? It's not like, oh, my life is over, and like it's not centered on you. Like, true grief is like, I will miss this person because I love them. It's an expression of love. Yeah. Right. So I think kind of like I see what you're saying is like, deal with these negative emotions, but take you out of the center of it. Like the guy running away from his wife, whose daughter is sick. He's like putting himself like, I will feel bad, instead of showing up for his daughter and like feeling sad or like feeling these hard emotions, but not in a selfish sense, in like a truth-seeking sense.
If Brogan died of typhoid tomorrow, I'd be fucking crushed. It would destroy me. It would really take me out. It'd be a bad day. I would grieve a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think grief is like, we've hit on probably the most difficult part of Stoicism to talk about. And if there's one part that you would throw out, maybe it's this. And everyone's like, I'm totally on board, but like, forget Stoicism if my kid dies. Like, forget Stoicism if my dog dies even, right? Like, it's like, I want this for I think it can be a pragmatic approach too. I want this for other things. I don't want it for that. I want to feel for that. I want to suffer for that.
Should we be prepared for death as the thing that we're worrying about? Or should we be worried about not living this life that we have and being so detached from everything that we're not actually living it? Because I think that's the problem with Gen Z right now, right? That's the problem. We don't need this narrative of, detach and prepare for the worst. We need a narrative of hope and romance, right? Right?
Yeah, that's the sort of the cap off on my video is that like Gen Z's biggest issue is apathy.
Yeah.
Gen Z's biggest issue isn't like an excess of romance and emotion and attachment. It's apathy.
Yeah, so more apathy is not the solution for your apathy, right? It's like and Stoicism selling apathy or making you more efficient and effective at it. That's compelling. I think that it's two sides, right? So if you're apathetic about things you should care about, that's wrong. If you're overly invested in things you shouldn't care about, that's wrong as well. It's really common sense to me, and I'm interested if you two have an objection with that more, less like more steel-manned or strong-man version of it. So the issue with apathy is you would say you're not caring about things you should care about. You're not attaching to things that have value and are worthy of value. They might not have unlimited value. You shouldn't have these crazy, if this doesn't, what's an example of something Gen Z is apathetic towards?
Say just like their ability to change their outcome, like voting, things like that.
Yeah.
I think on the left and on the right, so many young people are just completely black-pilled on the democratic process and the future of their country, and they see themselves as having no place in the outcome.
Gen Z popularized the term black pill, which is this idea that like it's all pointless, it's all over.
Yeah, like you can't do anything. You are useless.
And that says a lot about our collective psyche right now.
Yeah, that's sad. I mean, so the argument would be that you, if you're apathetic, so this is the Stoic line, right? Some things are up to you, some things aren't. This is called the dichotomy of control. It's a very famous Stoic position. It's probably the first one anybody learns if they learn it. There's two parts to the dichotomy of control. The one is that the things that are not up to you, you should practice detachment from.
Yeah.
But the things that are up to you, you should practice attachment towards. Right? And then the Stoic line is, well, what's up to you? Your decisions, your behavior, your emotions, your disposition, your character.
Okay.
So the Stoicism is about, I should be super upset if I act like a dick. Like if I do something wrong, I should be like, that was a really bad thing for me to do. I should not at all be apathetic towards my behavior, my relationship with others, my involvement in my political community. All of those things are things that I should care about because those are things that are up to me. And now what causes blackpilling, in my opinion, as someone who just learned about this term today.
Yeah, we explained it right before we started filming.
I also have no idea what I'm talking about. But something that can cause apathy is an overreaction. It's an over response to sensitivity, right? It's like, I don't know.
That's very true.
I don't know how to handle being mushy and gooey. So I'm going to withdraw within myself, or I'm going to put up a barrier. And what Stoicism provides is well, let me tell you how to deal with being mushy and gooey is like, care about and be sensitive to things that involve you, that have to do with you. And put up a bit of a shell, build up a bit of a tolerance to the things that don't have to do with you, that don't involve you. And that for me is a way to be apathetic when apathy is deserved, and caring, sensitive, and connected when those things are deserved as well.
Well, that's well said. And the description of apathy being a response to being like overly gooey, that's very true. A lot of these incels, they like love or something, and then the love is taken away, and then they flip the other way, and they're like, I'm totally apathetic, it's all over, yada yada. The kind of love that I'm after is mutual delusion. I want to be deluded about a person and think that they're amazing, and I want them to be deluded about me, and I want that delusion to last forever. I think that's beautiful. Mutual delusional love.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could talk about this stuff as I'm aware of the fact that maybe I won't be coming off that lighthearted. We can talk about delusional love as a joke, and I think there's something funny and creative about it. But at the end of the day, the question is, how do you want to live? Okay, so let me throw it back to you. Why are you prioritizing delusional love?
I guess because I'm a fairly delusional person. I'm pretty disconnected from true things.
Yeah. So if you don't have, part of the appeal of ancient Greek philosophy is that you build an argument about why it is the best way to live. And if you come and you say, I want to be X, I want to be delusional. Do you have an argument for that? Nope. Then it's like, well, we can't have a conversation anymore. Like, I don't know what you want from me. Like, I don't, it's not like,
but it makes me feel good I get to date a god, and the god gets to date me and view me as a god. Isn't that fun? I mean, that sounds nice, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so it sounds nice. It sounds nice in the short term. It doesn't. So the idea, like, you can make two kinds of arguments, right? You can make a pragmatic argument, which I'm trying to be resistant to, which is like, well, it's good now, but it'll be bad later.
Right.
What goes up will come down. You're going to crash. You're going to have those fights where, somebody is emotionally broken. You'll be screaming at each other, yelling at each other. So the pragmatic thing is like, don't you want to avoid that? And that's the kind of way you talk to non-Stoics, because you try to persuade them through their own twisted logic, right? So presumably many people want to be the way you are. They want to be deluded because it feels good. So you try to make an argument around feeling.
Okay.
But that's not the end argument of Stoicism. The end argument of Stoicism is to say, you've gotten something wrong about what it means to be a human being.
And we shouldn't be driven by our feelings anyway.
You shouldn't be driven by your feelings because your feelings are produced by what you think. And what you want to ask is if what you think is right. That is a Stoic view. So I think one good objection to Stoicism is if you start incorporating ideas of the subconscious, you start incorporating these kind of Humean ideas. Hume has this idea that first we feel, then we rationalize our feeling with an idea. If we start bringing in these Humean concepts, then you kind of get this like bedrock disagreement about where feelings come from. But the Stoic argument is that our feelings come from how we view the world. And so if you're feeling, you're never motivated by your feelings. You're motivated by what you think, which produces feelings, which then feed back into the loop. So it always comes back to the question of, are you thinking the right thing? And then we need a decision-making criteria to decide that. And if your decision-making criteria is like, does it feel good? We could probably make pragmatic arguments that like deluded people don't have the happiest lives. There's probably scientific, psychological studies that they don't have the happiest, most stable lives, right?
I think sane people have the worst lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if reality sucks. Can I take, do you have anything to add or can I keep going?
Keep going.
Okay. Can I take this politically and say, how does this apply politically? Because I don't have any control over the government. I'm just one guy. Cool. How am I supposed to make social change like that?
Yeah. So I'm not, I'm a philosopher. I'm not a political philosopher, but I'm going to try my best here. I think in terms of like political disposition, you see a disposition towards Stoicism in right-wing communities, because I think that there is a theoretical underpinning in the right of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, focus on what you can control. And so those ideas are very appealing. Those are immediately intuitive.
Yeah,
to people.
It seems like a very center-right, moderate-right position.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
When you get into the more farther right, it becomes more like, nah, it's out of my control, and I'm blaming all these forces.
Yeah, so kind of center-right, if that's the right location. But there is Stoicism parts to, I don't know, I guess the left, if we're understanding that as kind of collectivist action or systemic issues. I mean, the Stoic view is always to focus as much as you can on the systemic issues insofar as is in your control, so that you do not become apathetic or black-pilled, and you stop yourself before, burnout is presumably a response of, extending that sphere of concern a bit too wide, a bit too long. And so there's a kind of a pragmatic argument for Stoicism, I think, even in terms of collectivist action or things like this. There's just no, like, if you strip it away and you think about what I said, right, which is to get right the things that are up to you, understand the things that are not up to you, insofar as you will then influence them with your actions, your behaviors, and your choices.
Oh, okay.
So you don't want to plug your ears and not know anything about the world, because your job is to then go out and influence and engage with the world. Right. But get that part right, and don't stress about the parts don't overly attach, I should say. You should be concerned, it matters, but you don't overly burn out or become overly emotional or passionate, would be the Stoic term, about these things that are totally outside of your sphere of control. That I think is still good advice and does not contradict, I don't think, with any sort of position on the left, unless we get back to, no, I don't think it does, as far as I'm aware.
I'm going to create a character for you here.
Yeah, thanks.
I want to see. So imagine a 22-year-old who is a virgin, and he's, at this point, the years went by, 17, 18, 19, 20, it's just not working out. He's gotten pretty nihilistic on the concept of like ever finding a partner, like ever having sex. He finds Stoicism and somehow deludes himself into believing like, this is something I should give up on, and this is my path in life, and like it's outside of my control. I should just be like completely, instead of trying to like improve his situation and alleviate the pain of being of not being loved.
Yeah.
Which is totally in his control to do so. If you could, I'm sure anybody out there who is in that position can there is a way to be a better person, to become attractive.
It's over for some people.
I don't believe so. But instead of that, he just finds stoicism and like picks up meditations and he's like, oh, this is what I was missing. I was missing this system of thinking to explain away all this suffering. And now I'm like, not going to try again. I'm not going to try to improve myself. I'm not going to do these things. I'm just going to like accept my lot in life and be apathetic.
Mm-hmm.
So like, is that person, how do you think someone, because that's a person I feel like I've known or I see on the internet.
They exist, right?
That exists.
It's not a, yeah.
That totally exists. I've read that story like on the internet 1,000 times. How does that person come to that conclusion through stoicism?
Well, so I don't remember if we've mentioned this, but there's that internet community, and then there's that what the actual philosophical tradition is, right? And so I think what they do is they fall into an internet community, and I'm not a specialist in this, but what I presume it's an internet community that's kind of algorithm based, so it feeds people what they want to hear, which is not what helping people is about. It's often telling them what they don't want to hear. So if you're just telling people what they want to hear, which is to say, it's not up to you, it's not your fault because it's not in your control, you shouldn't care about this, you should stop feeling the things you're feeling because they hurt. I don't really engage with a lot of that kind of stoicism content on the internet, but I think that they're, what the question was, why would they find that, or why would they feel that way?
The question was, how would they get that out of stoicism?
Oh, I mean, they would get that out of stoicism because they're watching stuff that's not stoicism, right? And I want to engage with your question candidly, but you're just describing something that's not stoicism. What you're describing is, you're describing, we call that in the community little s stoicism.
Little s
right?
stoicism.
Okay. As opposed to capitalized stoicism, which is, a proper noun referring to an actual thing. Little s stoicism is what comes from so you had stoicism, then you had the adjective, and then you had, this, you should be stoic as a man. And then this even further bastardized internet community, which is to say, we're going to take these cool sounding quotes with these AI images of lions and statues, and you're going to take them out of context, even though this is a systematic, difficult to understand philosophy. We're going to give you a quote out of context that jives with your intuition or jives with what you want to hear, and it's going to make you feel good in the moment, but ultimately isn't going to lead you to any sort of healthy or productive past. So they would get that out of stoicism because, I think about this a lot too. The self-help pathway for men is a lot different than the self-help pathway for women, right? So yeah. I think about I go, man, why are there not more women in the stoicism community? And I think, is stoicism sexist? Are we exclusionary? And I there might be issues there, but I don't think the way that we're presenting stoicism is sexist or anything like this. But I think what happens is typically women start to feel a bit unhappy. Maybe they Google something, maybe they talk to somebody, and they get recommended to therapy. Yeah. They get recommended to, professional psychologists,
right?
Or other avenues of self-help. So there's this kind of, there's this fork in the road between feminine self-help and masculine self-help. And so the men end up there because they're, I guess, foregoing, I think, often this other fork in the road to these internet communities that are often toxic and unhelpful.
Were there ever any famous female Stoics?
There's famous philosophers, like there's famous people who are interested in Stoicism as their life. In terms of practitioners, not as many.
Because that to me strikes me as like it's a male-brained ideology, which is obviously. So
do you think there's a male brain?
It sounds like it seems like if you create Stoicism and you have a bunch of dudes show up to the Stoicism convention, like you go to Stoicon, I'm presuming that's mostly men.
Yeah, I would say certainly mostly men, not only.
So surely there's something about that that's attracting men, right?
Yeah, I took male brain as being a more essentialist claim that men and women are different, or you're talking I think there's absolutely ways that men are socialized to view relating with their emotions. And yeah, I think that Stoicism appeals to that way of relating with your emotions more than it does the way that women are socialized. I think women are typically socialized. I think there's also, because this is something, I wish I could remember the paper, but it's basically Stoicism as emotional labor. And it's an academic paper that looks as small as Stoicism as a way that men perform emotional labor in the house, which is to say, men are expected in moments of turmoil to maintain a steady mind, right? To be able to perform, to not be overly upset, overly emotional. That's kind of that. And basically the paper was arguing that this should fall under the umbrella of how we conceptualize emotional labor, not just the mom, talking to the, crying child and consoling the crying child, but also the father doing the really difficult, shitty thing the father doesn't want to do and doing that without being too, I guess, dramatic about it. And so that's a value that I think men are, expected to cultivate.
Yeah.
I grew up doing martial arts. I grew up in a fighting sport and a fighting culture, and something about that you cultivate is the small s stoicism, is the capacity to like, what is the hardest thing you can do without getting upset about it? And that is I think that's an important value. I think that's an important thing to be able to do. I think both men and women should be able to do shitty things, at least in the moment, and grit through it. Maybe you need to go back through and examine how hard that was and tap back into your feelings. But I think at least in the short term, stoicism is important. But so I guess maybe if there was a pathway, it's like, look, you aspire to that as a masculine value from a very young age, something you're taught as a child, not to cry, to not be overly emotional. You then find yourself as an overly emotional or more emotional than you want to be adult. And then you return back to stoicism as a way to cultivate that character. And then you fall into communities that bastardize a philosophy by taking parts of it, right?
Yeah, that tracks. I mean, I feel better in my personal experience, anecdotally. I think that all the times I've been told to, or I've heard like men have been told to process their emotions better. I feel like that's a very common critique of men. It's just like, men don't process emotion, like show your emotion, be more emotional. But I have found so much more sanctity when I am very stable in hard situations. When things happen and I like am that pillar that people rely on. And the closer I try to be that, the farther, how much more I try to be that stable pillar, that stone in people's lives, the better I feel about my place in the world. I feel less emotional, but I don't feel less emotional in like a compartmentalizing sense. I feel like just more steady.
Well, you can talk about genuine, I mean, maybe not be stoicism, you're not practicing it, but this genuine, we don't want people that numb themselves. We will deal with it if we have to, right? The example I always raise of this kind of masculine value, because the way that, and this is just me, this is just my own personal thoughts. It's not grounded in philosophy here. I didn't do a PhD in this, but I think about femininity as developing, not feminine, but like, I think that I want to be, this is not an essentialist claim about the way men or women are. I think about this as the way that these are constructed. I think femininity is about developing ambiguity. So, your child cries and you go, what's wrong? Two kids are arguing, what happened here? Like, I want to develop the ambiguity. I want to understand the situation. Oh, you're upset. That's because you have a part of this that matters and value. There's a value to your perspective. Everybody has their own perspective that brings value. And I see the masculinity as a kind of a reduction of ambiguity and about a capacity to act, which requires a reduction of ambiguity. It requires the ability to say, no, this is the thing that we're doing and I'm committing to it. And the example I give out like healthy stoicism is like, yeah, somebody needs to put the dog down because the dog's sick. And it's like, if everybody's crying or everybody is a mess, and that doesn't have to be the husband or the man, it can be anybody, I know my partner would be better at that than I am. But that is healthy stoicism. That is like, somebody has to do the difficult thing and get it done. And when you're talking about you feel better about your relationship with people, it's like, you don't want to be the person that's doing that unwillingly or doing that at a cost to yourself, but you want to be the person that can actually do that and actually be okay, while also still loving your pets, presumably. And that's a difficult balance, but that's like I think there's something really healthy and valuable there. I totally agree with you. That's something we want to be able to do as people, right?
Yeah. I mean, part of I'll say like the misapplication of stoicism, and that's what like a lot of my research has been about recently. I'm kind of like, I'm straw manning the misapplication to talk about like why it's how it's causing apathy in young men.
Sorry to cut you off. I don't think it's a straw man. I think you're hitting on a very real phenomenon that is not healthy for people.
We all hate the lower S Stoics here.
Yeah, we're all on the same team. Yeah. We're all
well, on the lower S Stoics, we can all agree.
The lower S Stoics. Yeah, I mean, the amount of I have a part. There's a part of my video where I just talk about like the critiques of it, and I have like just endless YouTube thumbnails I've pulled of just videos with like 2 million views that are like 11 Stoic techniques to make her chase you. right? And it's like, yeah, videos like channels with 1 million subs and videos with millions and millions of views
why is there an appetite for that kind of stuff instead of the uppercase S Stoic? Like, why does that stuff have 2 million views, not the uppercase S?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never really fallen in with that community, so I'm speaking for somebody that I'm speaking for. Group
Pull those
people.
up, Henry. Look up Stoicism. Just look up Stoicism on YouTube, and this is the name
to
these
make her
people-
chase you.
Look at this. This is the name that these people are giving the uppercase S Stoics. 10 secrets to make any woman always chase you. Just like literally just Google Stoic on YouTube and you'll see like 1 million of these. Yeah.
Persuasion. You look for it with the
Look on the right side. Zoom in on those recommendeds. How to make any woman regret losing you. 10 Stoic principles so nothing can affect you. And then it's all these AI generated Greek dudes. Master the art of persuasion. 9 traits to make any woman truly fall in love with you. Stoicism. If they ignore you, act like this. How walking away can be your greatest power. It's literally like, I see this, how walking away can be your greatest power. And I imagine from Stoic mind, by the way, with this AI generated AI voice thing. And I imagine like a loser who lost and he's like, I'm walking away, but that's because I'm Stoic. And it's not because I'm a loser that lost.
And again, like, I mean, I just want to preface this. Like, I'm not trying to, I don't want to dunk on people that are like, didn't have the privilege of going to university for this and are like, I'm struggling. I'm going to Google this thing that seems interesting to me. And this is what I'm going to come across. And I'm also, the thing with this kind of stuff too, is it's also interspersed with actual Stoic quotes, right? So it's like, there's nothing wrong with watching a video like this and being like, wow, Seneca said something really helpful and interesting. That makes total sense because Seneca was a really smart guy. So I don't want to, basically I just don't want to punch down at people that find this content helpful.
I'll do it.
As long as we got somebody. But the question is, why does that happen? And the question was more from a dating perspective, right? That's what we're trying to hit on. Like, why, like when you get rejected by a woman, is that the...
Well, a lot of it is about that, but it's general. It's like everything, like, losing out on whatever opportunity.
I think it is the black belt. I mean, earlier we were talking about the black belt before the episode, and you two know more than me, but I was framing it as this, like, you're stepping outside the game. It's the way that I understand the Sigma male. I don't understand much about the Sigma male, but I think it's like I'm stepping outside the traditional hierarchy.
Yeah, this is very Sigma male coded. Stoicism and Sigma male stuff.
Well, exactly. Like you like the fake scenario here of the woman breaks up with her boyfriend because he like ignores her and plays League of Legends 8 hours a day. And then he creates a frame in his head from lowercase s Stoicism of like, oh, you know what? Like, this doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
I'm fine. And it's just idiosyncratic. It's just like you've created a fucking fantasy in your head.
Yeah. Well, I think it appeals to you because it's a fantasy in your head. It appeals to you because it's something that you can do that has probably the best results for the short term that doesn't involve actually doing anything.
Yeah.
Actually going out and being different in the world, apologizing to somebody, talking to other people. So that's appealing, right? It's the biggest bang for the lowest amount of bucks, I guess. So that I think is the appeal. And then you combine that with being in a masculine mind frame where you're not sure about how to get kind of content about self-improvement. And that is my, amateur anthropology perspective.
It's a good perspective. Yeah. I think that's true.
I'd be interested if in your Stoic circles in the last couple of years, you've seen an uptick in people that just have grossly misunderstood the philosophy.
Yeah, does that bleed over into your communities at all?
I think it bleeds over in a certain amount. So one thing about my community, I have the Stoicism app and the podcast. A lot of our listeners are older. Like a lot of our listeners, I would say, are like 45 to 65.
Interesting.
And so this might be people who are looking for something a bit more genuine, looking for a way to understand the world that is not responding to kind of maybe an acute emotional crisis, at least not in the short term. Like, I don't want to just numb the pain. I'm interested about how to live. And you do see bleed over, and there is some judgment of it, but I think most people are actually pretty receptive. So there is a shutting down of anything that's like toxic. I don't know, just if you're being just like not a nice person to other people, or you start posting like misogynistic content, for example, there's like very little patience for that in the spaces I've seen, which is great. But there is a lot of patience for somebody who just doesn't understand.
Yeah.
Who's just like, oh, I tried, my girlfriend broke up with me and I just tried not feeling anything for 2 weeks. And now I feel like shit. There's a lot of sympathy for that in the community. It's like, yeah, well, it wasn't working for you because that's not how you actually do it. That's not what you should be trying to do. That's not what Stoicism teaches. And I think that's the way it should be. I do not like gatekeeping. I especially do not like kind of intellectual gatekeeping of something that's quite a complicated. It's just a pretty complicated idea, and it's like any other practice; it takes time to get good at. So you see bleed over. And then the other thing with internet communities is they tend to kind of self-sort, right? So once something's reached a critical mass of negative content, there's going to be, nobody's going to join that. It's looking for genuine stoicism, and then vice versa. Somebody's going to post a meme that doesn't resonate with the group, and they're like, I'm not going to go into this, genuine stoicism group. That's the way I've seen it evolve on the internet. The downside, I would say, the flip side of that is that, my YouTube channel, my podcast, it does not have these, it's not the 10 million views, right? So it's like, it's this weird thing where the top of the funnel is so much bigger. And that I see as a stoicism advocate, as the question is, well, how do you appeal to these people without losing the actual message? How do you appeal to people that are turning to stoicism without watering it down, without distorting it, without feeding into kind of some of the more negative thought patterns? And I haven't really cracked that. I think we're doing good work, but I think we're doing work that appeals to people who are already a couple layers deep and are looking to learn more. One more thing I'll add is that Epictetus, my favorite Stoic, talks about he's actually against advocating for Stoicism or going out into the world and being like, hey, you should be Stoic. He's just like, that doesn't work. It's not effective. It's not what people need. It's not, you shouldn't do that to your friends who are suffering. You should be like, hey, I learned about this cool philosophy. Have you considered thinking about it this way? Not in their moments of crisis. So it's not a Stoicism that's about converting people. It's about being ready when they come.
Here's how I'd be a Stoic. Please be a Stoic. Please, please, please. Oh, I need you to. Continue.
Yeah. We haven't tried it yet. We should maybe an appeal to the emotions there.
I don't know what I'm going to do if you don't become a Stoic right now.
That's, the parallels to, I know a decent amount about Buddhism.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And, Tibetan Buddhism. And the parallels are pretty insane. I mean, Trungpa Rinpoche, have you ever heard that name?
No.
He was, he brought Tibetan Buddhism to the West in the 60s, in like the Shambhala meditation centers. Anyway, but he said, like, you can't, his line about, you can't tell the truth, you have to be the truth, or else it's your truth. Because if I tell you, like, you need to do this, it's like, I'm demanding things of you. If I'm just, same with Stoicism, right? If you are just being virtuous, you radiate that off of you.
Yeah.
And that's the better way to, spread good in the world or spread virtuosity in the world, rather than just like demanding people to like, you know what, you're wrong. You're wrong about everything you think. You need to think this. No one responds to that, right? Yeah,
so that's a pragmatic argument again. Yeah, I don't think it's very effective. It comes back down to the dichotomy of control as well, which is like other people's behavior isn't up to you. And the other thing to clarify though, I mean, Epictetus is like super down with being really intense to people that come to his school.
Yeah.
Like once you're like, I want to learn this, it's like, okay, well, you're not living up to it. You're not acting the way you should be acting. If you tell me you want to be a Stoic, he's totally fine with berating people that consent to that relationship. But, and this is not just Stoicism.
You're not a Stoic. You'll never be a Stoic.
Well, I think it's a little bit less crying and a little bit more.
That's how I would be Epictetus.
But there's still time. We can still open up a Toronto school of Stoicism here. And I was just thinking of that terrible Epictetus impression.
I'm going to open up a school about how to feel as much pain as possible at all times.
Yeah.
You already have one.
Oh, yeah. Right. Just my YouTube channel.
So that's like philosophy of life is not, the person's got to come to the water to drink or whatever metaphor you want. They open the door, but they got to walk through it. However you want to conceptualize it, you're not changing anybody who doesn't want to participate in it. I think is something that we've seen and I think is true.
So from my understanding, my brief understanding and my research into the history of it, I just want to make this argument here and see what you think.
Love it.
Okay, so you have the ancient Greek world is just suffering constantly. Mm-hmm. And then you have...
Oh no, my child died again. Whoops. Yeah. Well, throw it with the rest.
And then you have Zeno,
who by the way thought that a turtle could outpace the arrow because
that was a different Zeno.
Same Zeno. I'm clearly an idiot. The arrow moves quicker.
Merchant, ship crashes and he's shipwrecked in Athens. His whole livelihood is destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have who's the next one? Is Seneca the next one?
No,
chronologically?
it's Zeno, Cleanthes, Chrysippus are the first three.
Okay, and then the Roman Stoics.
Then you jump forward 200 years. Then
If
you
I
got the
jump
Roman
forward 200
Stoics.
years to the Roman Stoics, right?
Yeah.
Epictetus was a slave.
Yep.
I believe he was beaten and like his leg didn't work. He couldn't
Yep.
walk properly. Seneca was rich.
Yep.
Seneca was very, very wealthy. And then Marcus Aurelius was the emperor, right? So you have like someone who had to explain away the suffering of the world because he lost everything. Someone had to interface with the suffering because he lost everything. Someone who had to interface with suffering because he had nothing, was a slave. Someone who like had to interface with it because he had everything and realized like that didn't make him happy. And then someone who had to be the best he could possibly be at all times because he basically ruled, for all intents and purposes, was like the ruler of the world, right? So do you think these extreme conditions that Stoicism was developed in make it more practical now or less practical now?
Yeah, like, so I think there's a couple points there. One is like this is the classic argument against big ass Stoicism, against actual Stoicism, which is that it is a pragmatic philosophy that developed in a time that was really terrible, but it's not actually the right way to live, and we don't need to live it. We don't need to live that way because our times are not that terrible. Our children aren't dying at this.
In the handbook,
right?
doesn't he mention children dying like 8 times? I counted it when I was reading it. It was something like that. It was like 7 or 8 times. He's like, when your son dies.
But right, like I don't have the exact number, but Marcus Aurelius had multiple dead children, maybe more dead children than alive children, up to like 4 or 5 when he was writing the Meditations.
Yeah,
these are not like abstract concepts to these people.
Yeah,
these are things that they encounter in their life multiple times. Right, your 4th or 5th dead.
Skill issue. My child would never die, and if it did, it would destroy me.
So that's like that. I think is one of the most robust objections to Stoicism, and probably the one that I resonate with the most, which is that it is a pragmatic philosophy that it pretends not to be. It creates a very compelling argument about why it's not. But at the end of the day, we're not rational creatures. We're feeling creatures. And you've just developed the way of thinking that makes you feel the best. You've just gone back to epicureanism, just with more steps. That I think is the most compelling objection to Stoicism that I found. And maybe it's the case, but then even if it is, meh, as a pragmatist, I would still take most of Stoicism.
Yeah.
There's this objection of like, you know, if your philosophical argument wouldn't make you live differently, then it's probably one not worth arguing about. And so it's like, if at the end of the day, what grounds Stoicism is different, we still end up with Stoicism. Now, you know, whether that's the most compelling thing or not, that at least is where I'm at with it. The other thing you were saying is like, does it apply today? Yeah, I mean, yes, I think it applies today. I think that this was what I was going to say. I just think you're getting the historical cause and effect a little backwards, right? We have Seneca's stuff, we have Marcus Aurelius' stuff, and we have Epictetus' stuff. Epictetus is a bit of an outlier, but Marcus Aurelius really loved him, and his works were written down by a famous Roman. We have their works because they were rich and powerful, right? And so it's like, oh, this is the thing that appealed to the rich and powerful. No, the rich and powerful's works are the ones that monks copied down over thousands of years. So those are the ones we still have. And that, I think, is there is a bit of, you know, if we put our like political lens onto that time, yeah, people that are educated are going to pretend to do this because they're going to have leisure time. It's going to tend to be people that have the kind of education everyone has today are going to be actually really, really rich back then. Yeah. So there is that sub community this appeals to. But that, I don't think you have to be rich or powerful or famous or even in an extreme circumstance for Stoicism to appeal to you or for you to be a good teacher of it. These are just the people that people thought, wow, that's really cool. Marcus Aurelius wrote this. That's really cool. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to save 10 copies when I had to do it by hand.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to add about Stoicism, because this loops back to a point we were making earlier about kind of political community and things like this. Zeno, when he crashed in Athens, and he didn't learn Stoicism. He didn't found Stoicism in a vacuum. He learned cynicism. Cynicism from one of the students of the founder of cynicism.
Diogenes.
Yeah, Diogenes. From Diogenes' pupil. And Diogenes is, for those that don't know cynicism, it's a very famous Greek philosophy that it's about freedom. It's about authenticity. It's about getting rid of anything that society puts on you or expects of you. And Diogenes is famous for doing all kinds of crazy
And it's about jacking off in a barrel.
Jacking off in a barrel is part of your exercise as a very public barrel. I mean, so Diogenes would masturbate in public, right? He would.
I'm listening.
Yeah.
This seems more my speed.
Now we're talking. He would masturbate in public, urinate in public, defecate in public. And so the cynicism, the word cynic actually comes from the Greek word for dog. So people just say, you're acting like a dog. Like you're acting like a mutt on the street, just shitting on the ground. And he's like, yeah. What are you going to do about it?
Easily the most based one we've touched on yet.
This is what I say if I see Diogenes today. I go to a cop and I say like, "Hey, can you arrest that guy in jail?" And then they put him in jail.
Yeah. Except they don't actually.
They wouldn't actually. Maybe 10 years ago, but not now.
Yeah.
So this is what Stoicism was responding to, and Stoicism is like Diogenes is like cynicism, but like less radical. Stoicism is like, I want to be a cynic, but I want to like have a house. Maybe I want to have a job, get into politics, be a member of my community. Cynicism is about rejecting your community. It's about being apolitical. Stoicism is not about that. It's about being a good member of your political community.
Interesting.
It is like, and so you might criticize it. You might say, well, it's watered down cynicism. It's cynicism for people that still want to be, powerful and rich. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's not this black pill. I think cynicism might be a bit more of the black pill. But people just, I guess, haven't seen that on the internet yet. Or maybe they still want to be cool. They still want to think they're cool. And Stoicism lets you black pill and be cool, but this isn't cool.
That Stoicism lets you black pill with have a Rolex. Still.
Yeah.
Interesting.
This doesn't.
I'm liking these ancient philosophies. I want to make a quad. I'm learning so much: Epicureanism, Stoicism, and cynicism.
What's the fourth one?
In the fourth, there's skepticism is the fourth one. If you're looking at Hellenistic philosophy, and there's also Aristotelianism.
Okay.
Skepticism is also about living in accordance with the truth, but they just didn't think you could know anything. So they were like, if you believe something, you're making a mistake. You got to really.
It was like that was Socrates.
So Socrates, I love it. I love this stuff. It's so interesting. Socrates is almost like this Christ-like figure, right? So he's this person, he totally breaks the mold. He's hated by his community for the radical truth he's bringing. He's killed by his community. He's sentenced to death. He's given opportunities to escape his execution, but he chooses to die as a martyr. I don't think that happened with Christ, but Socrates is choosing to die as a martyr. And then you end up with this schism of all these different schools that are saying, no, this was Socrates' best teaching. No, this was Socrates' best teaching.
So he's the anti-centrist of these. He's all of them.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about it like that. So he is, and so I'll just explain Aristotelianism because it doesn't sound as cool, but it might appeal to you both. Aristotelianism is this idea of, you want to, what does it mean to be a good person? Well, it means to actualize what it means to be a human, like be the best human you can be. And then Stoics go, well, what's the most important part of being a human? It's your brain. We're decision makers. You got to live with knowledge. You got to live rationally. And Aristotle is just more common sense. Aristotle just goes, well, the best people are just the people who they're the smartest. They're the most popular. They've got the most money. They've got the best bodies. The women love them. All this kind of stuff, right? And it's like I think about the Aristotelian ideal as like Batman, right? It's like he's the billionaire. He's beautiful. He's socially great, and he also goes and helps people. But the Stoic ideal, the radical Stoic claim is you'd have Batman. And then you'd have somebody who's like house burnt down, his community exiled him, and then he died of the plague. But he was a really good person. And the Stoics would be like, both of those people are the same. They both had great lives.
Right.
And the average Athenian would be like, that's stupid. Obviously,
I don't want to be the guy that dies of the plague. Poor.
Yeah. Obviously, the billionaire philanthropist is a better person, was happier. Maybe we still respect the character of this person, but he didn't have a good life. He wasn't happy.
Interesting. Okay, so it's more outcome oriented.
Well, so it's outcome oriented, absolutely. But the main point I want to get is that it includes other aspects of being a person, which is the social aspect, the physical aspect. Aristotle would just be ableist, right? I don't want to. I don't know if there's many Aristotelian scholars here, so forgive me if I go too far. But he'd be like, yeah, some people just, if you're born and you can't.
One guy just unsubscribed.
I think there's actually half our audience is Aristotelian subscribers.
But it's like if you can't walk, you're just worse than people that can. He would make these kind of essential claims. Whereas the Stoics would never say that. The Stoics might have some sort of issue around mental, like there might be some sort of issue about if you have a severe cognitive impairment, then you're different than other people, which is it's its own issue. But they don't extend that to your wealth. They don't extend that to your body, your political position, anything like that. It's about how good of a person you are.
When Brogan's on a bit of a tirade, he sometimes says ugly people are worse people. He's like, beautiful people are good people.
Yeah, it's the Nietzschean in me. I think, yeah, part of I get a huge issue with lots of people, but it seems like Gen Z as well, is we're very in the moment, and we don't think about things as processes. And I think a lot of people are looking for that philosophical system or those answers that they think are going to be switches in their brain.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, the person who tries to just like think the right thought and then like they're not heartbroken anymore. Whereas these things are like long, like you act these things out, right? They're very long processes. It's the same like I really love Nietzsche, and like that's all about like living like future in accordance with like the future and like always striving up and up and up and up and up.
Well, and you're familiar with Nietzsche's criticism of Stoicism, I assume?
I was at one point.
You've learned so many things. You've forgotten this one. I mean, it's the one you started with. It's an apathy criticism. It's to say, you're like afraid of living authentically. You're afraid of engaging with the world as a place where there's tragedy and suffering and glory and triumph and failure. You're just like, you're apathy in your way out of it. And he's like, that's just kind of sad and pathetic, right? That's his criticism. I think that's a good criticism because it's actually engaging with it as it is, right?
Yeah.
He's seeing it as it is and engaging with it.
Wait, stay on that one, Henry. I want to see him talk about Epicureans and Stoics. You guys keep going.
Yeah. Well, this is our
Nietzsche versus Stoics.
That's our episode on it. That's episode. If you want to know more.
Yeah, there it is. Go watch it.
So are we reading this? Is that what
that's sorry. You guys keep. I just want to read this for myself. Does he hate the Epicureans too?
I don't know. I don't pay as much attention.
The Epicurean seeks out the situation, the persons, and even the events that suit his extremely sensitive intellectual constitution. He forgoes the rest, that is, almost everything, because it would be too strong and heavy a diet. The Stoic, by contrast, trains himself to swallow stones and worms, glass shards, and scorpions without nausea. He wants his stomach to be ultimately insensible to everything. The chance of existence pours into him. He brings to mind the Arabian sect of the Aswa that one encounters in Algiers. Like these insensitive people, he likes to act out his insensitivity before an invited audience, which is precisely what the Epicurean gladly eschews, for he has his garden. Stoicism may well be advisable for those with whom fate improvises and who live in violent times. This is exactly what we were talking about, and depend on impulsive and changeable people, but someone who more or less expects fate to allow him to spin a long thread does well to take an Epicurean orientation. People engaged in work of the spirit have always done so. For it would be the loss of all losses for them to forfeit their subtle sensitivity in exchange for a hard Stoic skin with porcupine spines.
Cool.
What is that? What does any of that mean?
Nietzsche's you could just point at any sentence he ever wrote. It's just like fucking so hard.
Yeah. I mean, his point. So he's referencing there. So the Epicureans, again, the Epicureans say, well, we want to maximize pleasure, minimize pain. And then the next question was, well, how do we do that? And their answer was, well, you actually want to live quite minimalistically. And they advocated for living in a commune, basically. You live in a garden with your friends. You cook just enough to eat. You make your potatoes. You make your veggies, things like this. And so what he's saying that the Epicureans, I think he's actually doing the same kind of criticisms. He's saying they're a bit too meek. They can't handle the extreme ups and downs.
Right.
They want the six all the time.
Right.
They want to be in their garden. But if you're going to live a long life, better to be that person that's in a long garden. Whereas, only if you are a prisoner of war or you're in some sort of terrible circumstance should you train yourself to eat worms and stones. Saying there's no point in doing that. Life's not so bad to need Stoicism if you're not actually in like a terrible circumstance, is what he's saying.
Okay, that's a great explanation. And we also already kind of covered the counter argument to what he's saying there. So shall we move?
Yeah, you've been working.
I have notes. First, just an observation. I noticed there's what do you think about JP, Jordan Peterson? I've noticed there's like a lot of overlap. Clean up your room and take care of yourself before you worry about the world kind of deal. And from someone like politically, how does that grok to you? Yeah,
I generally think that Jordan Peterson. I don't think I'm alone in this with being like I like his earlier stuff.
Yeah,
I think that it's like I'm not sure what's going. I'm not sure how he's doing currently. Psychologically,
yeah, he's not acting very stoic right now.
Yeah, no, I in a way in which I'm worried for him, and it becomes almost but
it's outside of your control.
It is outside my control. But you're allowed to worry.
Okay,
just not too much, right?
Yeah,
I'm not crying about it or anything.
Right. I'm crying about it.
Yeah. So I think I like Jordan Peterson when he stays in his area of expertise. I think what he does is his like return to some Jungian archetypes has been really interesting in the way that we think about self-improvement and this use of myth. I still think a lot about the way that he talks about myths and archetypes. But his stuff about clean your room is, I still think it's good advice if it doesn't come with the second part, right? There's this
right like, before you criticize others, right?
Yeah, before you criticize, like you just need to be nuanced, right? It's like, yeah, you need to be like an effective agent before you exert yourself into the world. Otherwise, how do you know if you're going to do more harm than good? And I just find that maybe one of you has a counter argument to that, but that just seems intuitive to me.
Right.
When you bring along other baggage of like, well, what's the bar for effective agent? Is it like never? Nobody's ever an effective agent. Nobody's ever has the room clean enough to interject. And then there's something patronizing too about it, right? If you look at a group of people you don't know and you say, clean your room, like maybe some people do have their metaphorical room clean and you're still just patronizing them because you're acting like they don't know what they're talking about. But like, yeah, you need to be an effective agent before you exert yourself into the world too strongly, because you don't know if you don't have your stuff figured out, you don't know the impact of your decisions, and you don't want to do harm. Nobody wants to do harm.
Okay. I don't have anything to add to that. I think I agree. I'm asking you this question seriously, and I'm asking you this question from like I really need some guidance here.
Cool.
So there's so much shit happening all the time.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. Every week some shit happens. Every week Brogan comes in, he's like, Israel's launched the nukes. So how do you interface with all this shit that's happening? Do you pay attention to it?
Yeah, so I think about myself as a person. If I think about a criticism of myself as a person, I don't think I'm as politically involved as I would like to be. I think that like from a position of relative privilege, I'm able to not think about a lot of stuff, and like I recognize that, and that's not the ideal Stoic thing to do, and it's something that I think I should probably do a bit more of. So in terms of how I deal with some stuff, sometimes it's just like not thinking about it, shrinking your world a bit. And if you can be an effective agent in your small world, that's still a good thing. But there's probably things that I could do within my power that would influence things outside of my circle. I think a big thing when Stoicism, it's not just me being candid, I'm about to say like, I think one of the way that I deal with it is just like a moral shortcoming, right? Is you just don't care about things I should care about. Which is, that's just it. That's just the way I am right now, and I'll work to improve that. Another thing about Stoicism is a lot about attention. So we haven't even talked about Stoic psychology here. We haven't even gotten into it. But Stoicism has this framework of basically impression.
Wait, leave that one up. That one's good. That one, I relate to that one.
Yeah. Just block it all out.
Yeah.
So the idea with Stoicism is it says what's in your control, how you respond to impressions is ultimately it. So an impression is the way your mind constructs the world or a thought. So the simple example is like somebody bumps into you, you get this impression, what an asshole, bumping into me, not looking out where he's going. And then your job with Stoicism is to identify that impression, first make a space between that and your belief, say that's not true, that's just my impression of the world, it's not necessarily true, and then evaluate it critically. And to suspend judgment if you don't know, I don't know what's going on in that guy's life, I don't actually know if he was a jerk, or oh no, he actually has turned around and said sorry, so actually that impression was false. He wasn't actually being a jerk. So Stoicism was a lot about, because we're talking about practice, right? What does it look like to practice? I can't just tell you to be these ways, you got to put it into practice. Stoicism as a practice is a lot about managing your attention. That's what has a lot in common with mindfulness. And so I would say when you have a lot going on, there's a couple questions, which is to say, in your control, or I shouldn't say in your control, I should say up to you, which is to say something that you can influence and moderate is your attention, where your attention goes. You also have the ability to kind of change sources of impressions, right? So if you find one at your current level of progress, your current level of character, this is not healthy for me, doesn't make me happy and it doesn't make me productive, you should take steps to then change the onslaughts of impressions that you're receiving. Epictetus has this line about something I'm thinking about kind of like negative habits, which is say, if you're angry, cultivate the habit of not being angry, which is to say, go 1 day without being angry, 2 days without being angry, 5 days without being angry. And so I think the same thing with all this stuff going on, being overwhelmed, I would say, I don't know, this is just kind of I don't know, I'm not really speaking for the Stoics here, but it's just like, what is your input of impressions? Are you handling those wrong, or is it the wrong input? And both of those can be true for your current level of progress. And I say progress, but what I mean is like, are you in a state where you can handle that in a healthy, productive way?
Yeah, I should go a day without being heartbroken. It's probably a good idea. Brogan and I are very anti-atomization.
Okay, what's that?
We think that being involved in the community is good, and we like building community. That's what we've been doing over the last year.
Yeah.
We get a lot of meaning from having other people in our lives. And I guess this all stemmed from this perception that Stoicism was kind of pushing you away from community in some way. But you're saying that it's like about being a good person in a community.
Yeah, so Stoicism has this thing called role ethics, which is to say, because all Stoicism says at a high level is you should live in a way that's true, and don't live in a way that's false. And people are like, well, that's not really helpful, right? Like, how do I act with other people? And Stoicism has this thing called role ethics, which says, well, we derive our responsibilities from other people by looking at our roles, some of which are natural. So like we just have them. I am just somebody's brother. I am somebody's son. Some of them we acquire. I am somebody's coworker, and that can change. And some of them we kind of choose or take on for ourselves. Like I think of myself as a coach or a teacher in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and that's something I've chosen for myself, and it comes with certain responsibilities. And so Stoicism is about integrate yourself into these communities and understand what your role is in those communities. And when you try to step outside that role, so if your role is to be, an effective, try to think of a good example, but if your role is rather small and you try to overstep it, so, your role is to be informed and vote strategically, and you try to overstep this in a way that's not productive, or you start getting stressed that you're not making more change than somebody with your role should make. That is a mistake. Or if you underperform your role, so you're not being a good friend to somebody, you're not being a good brother or son, were the examples I was giving. So, yes, it's about being in your community. I mean, one thing that Stoicism also did, like championing the kind of egalitarian aspects of Stoicism here, it actually, Diogenes invented the term cosmopolitan, but they popularized philosophically the idea of cosmopolitanism, which is cosmos is universe, polis is your city. So the Stoics were to say, my city is the universe, which is to say everybody is in my community. Whereas typical Athenian perspective would be like, no, I am an Athenian. Like, I don't care about those Spartans. Like, we don't like those guys. We're Athenians. Where the Stoics were like, no, you're a cosmopolitan. Everybody insofar as they are a human being belongs to the same community as you. So they actually have this expansionist conception of community. And so I know it's getting philosophical. The last thing here in terms of communities, they had this idea called oikiosis, which is the oikos is the Greek word for house. It's actually where economics comes from. That's what echo part in economics or eco. It's like the nomos is laws. So economics is like the laws of the household, how you govern your household. So oikiosis is an ethical idea that's basically to say that you're supposed to expand your ethical concern. You start at the atom, which is the individual, and you expand it over time. I'm not sure if it's a good picture. Yeah. You start with the individual and you expand it over time to say, okay, now it's my family unit. Now it's my neighborhood. Now it's my city. Now it's my country. Now it's all of humanity. Yeah. And so that is the Stoic ethical ideal, is to actually expand that concern such that you treat somebody in your community like you would a brother. I mean, not like you would a brother, because again, you have a different role in that sense, but with the same amount of concern, recognizing their humanness. Yeah. So that's not atomistic. That's the opposite of atomistic.
That's true. Right? That's true. You've made a good case about that. Do you think there'd be more or less communities if we were all Stoics? Or the same number, but it'd be better.
Probably less. Like, I don't know. Like, what? This is a pragmatic argument.
We got him.
Stoicism sucks. Like, I think people.
Our instincts were right. The vibes were off. And I was this close.
I think people are attracted to communities in part probably because people are emotional. People do a lot of things because they're emotional and non-reflective, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I don't want to stand here on the high horse and be like, oh, you really like your rec basketball league because it makes you feel good. That's a terrible thing. Like, that's a really stupid thing to say, right? I'm not saying that, but I don't know what a Stoicism. I don't know how people would organize themselves if they were all Stoics. Probably around interests. You'd probably end up at the same spot, but just with a little bit less, just a little bit less passions, right? A little less drama. A little less drama. Exactly.
Yeah.
You really did nail it.
Same thing, less drama. That's nice. Steelman, how does like romanticism fit into Stoicism? Because that's again my argument is if I think about like Twitter, okay? Let's take Twitter for an example. And in the amount of times I see something like It'll be a picture of a Victorian lamppost, and it's this very like ornate, very beautiful object, and then it'll be like a modern lamppost that's just like as functional as can be. There's no ornateness to it, and they'd be like, oh, where did it's always from a right wing perspective, right? They're like, where did society go wrong? Why did we lose this like passion?
Brogan's always seething on Twitter. This is a daily occurrence.
It's not good for you.
No, I interface a lot with Twitter. But like, where did this passion go in society? Where's this romance for aesthetics, right? So where does that fit into Stoicism? Because I see people who make that argument also make the argument that like you should be apathetic, you should have like detachment to reality, and those things just completely seem paradoxical to each other.
Yeah, I'm not. So what is how would you define romanticism?
In a very like nebulous sense, just like passion,
we're all vibes here. We've never read a book in our lives.
Yeah,
there's no defined terms.
Yeah, I'm not a scholar in philosophy.
I don't know. I don't really get it for where I'm coming from, to be honest. Probably a hearkening for a past age, for a bygone glory that is like manifesting in cherry-picked aspects of different eras.
Yeah,
I don't know. The other answer, again, to like psychologically project onto people that I don't know, would be that gooiness part, right? Which is to say, I'm soft and gooey. I don't know. I can't look that in the face. So I'm going to make this hard shell. And I'm speaking from experience, right? Like this is my own kind of experience. Develop a hard shell. And, but I also still really appeal to that passion. Cause you know what this guy has? This guy has passion, but like, this is Nietzsche's Übermensch, right? This is the cover often of Thus Spoke Zarathustra.
Yeah.
His Übermensch is like the overman. It's the ideal masculinity. Have you guys talked about Nietzsche on this podcast, or would I be retreading that ground?
No, we haven't.
We've probably mentioned him, and that's about it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, his thing with the slave versus master morality is he has this idea, which is that master morality was originally, and again, not a Nietzsche scholar here, master morality was the people that defined what was good and bad were the people that had power. So the king made the rule and you followed the rule, and because they had the power, they could kill you, they could take your things. And then slave morality is this Christian thing where a bunch of weak people banded together and said, no, it's actually a bad thing to take what you want. It's actually a bad thing to go out there and fulfill your passions. It's better if you're subdued, if you're humble, if you're meek. And he's like, that's clearly not true. It's just a pragmatic, adaptive thing that a bunch of weak people have done by banding together. They've warped what morality means by banding together. In a way to kind of invert the power structure on the people that have power, people that can go out and get what they want. And he's kind of speaking to this Übermensch as somebody who's going to go out and recreate a system of morality based solely on themselves, not based on what other people who are trying to limit you and hold you down want you to do. And so that's the Nietzschean position. That's why the criticism of Stoicism is a slave morality. It's like, what does the person who's locked in jail say? They say, well, I'm actually a better person than you, guard. I actually, I've figured life out and you haven't. And he's like, that's just you, that's just you rationalizing your own suffering.
Brogan, you actually intuited that critique just like off of vibes that Stoicism is associated with slave morality and you hate the slave morality part of it. Like you were just saying this and we've never heard of this. So it's good intuition. Okay.
It's totally true. It's what Nietzsche, and what I think is the Übermensch here, he's the person who makes his own morality, and he gets the feel without being vulnerable. That would be my guess. He's the person that gets to like live the passionate life, but also be invincible. And in that way, maybe it's do you know like Hegel, thesis, antithesis, synthesis?
Oh, we're familiar.
It took me 2 hours and 3 people explaining it to me.
Yeah, our last podcast was 3 Hegelian e-girls yapping at us about it, so we kind of get it.
So I don't know. I'm outside my comfort zone here, but this is maybe the synthesis of the Stoic and the Stoic and the sensitive person is the romantic who's invulnerable but still feels.
Oh, yeah. That describes Brogan pretty well.
Yeah.
I think it's a great place to be. You should have this hard shell, but it should be like glass, and then people can see inside. It's just a bunch of flowers and like marshmallows, and like little furry animals.
I have some questions just to close us off here about you.
Cool.
Just give us some examples. Materially, has Stoicism helped you?
Stoicism has given me a conception of how to live, right? So it's given me pre-studying philosophy and pre-studying Stoicism, I was just, you've used the word vibes many times. I was going on vibes, right? And the thing with vibes is vibes aren't coherent. It's not systematic. And some people might hear the word systematic and be like, ooh, I don't want to live systematically.
Yeah, the vibes on systematic are all off.
But like, I want to live the best life I can live. And so I want to have a system for doing that. And I think Stoicism right now is the best system I've found. You're talking about practical ways that that's affected me. I'm actually less judgmental about emotions now.
Interesting.
Because previously, when you didn't have a way of conceptualizing emotions, it's like, oh, I'm angry or I'm upset or I feel jealous. This is a shameful thing. This is a thing I shouldn't feel, but I have no way of controlling it. I'm just bad. Do you know the distinction between guilt and shame? That I think Martha Nussbaum makes this, but somebody else does as well.
No.
Maybe I'll just jump into it.
Yeah, go.
Guilt is something you've done and shame is something you are. And so you can be forgiven for something you're guilty for. You can atone for it, but you can't atone for shame because you were inherently wrong. And so I think pre-Stoicism, there came a shame with feelings, a shame with feeling emotional that I felt as a man or just the person in the life that I had. And now with Stoicism, I think, oh, well, I'm angry because I've judged that person who bumped into me as a jerk. And I can either say they actually are a jerk and I don't feel bad about my anger, or I can say, well, let me like kind of deconstruct that a bit. Or I can think about where did that belief come from? Where did that value system come from? I can deconstruct it. It's just given me a tool for like sustained emotional therapy that doesn't feel like I just should be different. And that's been really, really helpful in my life. It's probably one of the biggest benefits. That's the first one that comes to mind. Yeah.
Okay.
That's always a great question with people who are really into philosophy, because sometimes they just have like
No answer.
Stoicism seems like one you would have an answer.
Yeah,
for.
that's
like,
a good answer.
That
yeah.
makes sense.
A lot of the time, it's no answer.
Yeah, a lot of the time, it's absolutely. It's like they might as well spend their 7 years learning Harry Potter lore instead
There's nothing wrong with the Harry Potter lore. That's I think that's a deep, deep pool of wealth.
Why haven't you killed yourself yet?
Because I like to live. It's the same reason I'm afraid of death. Stoicism's like, don't be afraid of death, and I'm like, I like life. I think life is good, and I want more of it. And so that's why
very anti-Stoic.
Yeah, no, that is an anti-Stoic position.
Yeah.
That scares me because I want a good thing. I want more of a good thing.
Yeah.
The other way in which Stoicism has helped me is I try to be practical. It's not like, oh, this person passed away and I read Epictetus in that moment. It's nothing like this. It's that this making a metaphor of personal improvement that aligns with physical improvement has again enabled a kind of growth mindset. Epictetus. Actually, I wrote a paper on this. He compares Stoicism to wrestling, and I wrestled, so I'm interested in those kinds of metaphors. And so this real deep growth mindset. He talks about you've got to develop your muscles over time. When you eat theory, you've got to digest it. Or sorry, when you read theory, you've got to digest it the same way someone needs to digest their meal. If you go out and you just talk bullshit about philosophy, it's like somebody who's vomiting their meal up all over everybody. It's like, don't shut up. Digest it, show your muscles, show the difference in your body, and that will inspire people more than what you're vomiting onto them.
Interesting.
Right?
I love that.
And
so we could get stoically jacked. We could get mentally jacked.
Well, he does these metaphors all the time. They really resonate with me, which is funny. He talks about he's like, show me what you've learned about Stoicism. And somebody's like, oh, I can tell you what Chrysippus argued about passions. And he's like, that's like I tell you to show me the results of your exercise and you show me your gym. He's like, I don't want to see your gym. I want to see your muscles. Show me your muscles. Show me the scary thing you did, the courageous thing you did, the kind thing you did.
Okay.
That goes so hard.
Yeah, that does go hard. Yeah. With that in mind, what are some reps we can do? So one thing you said which stuck out to me was like, you can try not to feel grief for one day, right? Is that a rep?
That's a rep. I would say that's a rep. So there is the first. Oh, there's a lot of different reps. So let me think about this. So these are what you're asking is like, what are actual exercises for self-improvement, which is what I wrote my PhD on. So one exercise for self-improvement is just what's called critical assent, but it's basically the idea of you don't let any beliefs into you, any important beliefs in that you haven't already thought about or didn't notice happened. So when you're going around and something comes up on the news and it upsets you and something's already happened, you've already made a value judgment. And so critical assent is just like always make sure you're aware when that's happening. It's not, obviously that's not something we do all the time. Same way you can't just go out and run constantly. You're okay for the next 10 minutes, this 30 minutes in the morning. I'm going to think really carefully about the kind of impressions I'm receiving. I'm going to think cautiously about those. And maybe I believe the ones that are true. I don't believe the ones that are false. And I suspend judgment when I don't know. So that's one thing. There's also this idea of habituation, right? So there was negative habituation I talked about, but just whatever you want to do, get in a practice of doing it and a habit of doing it. Another thing that Epictetus talks about is abstaining things. So one thing that the Stoics talk about is the negative feedback loops that come with passion. They talk about this they use metaphors of momentum. So it's like I'm running downhill. And so when I'm running downhill, even if I want to change directions, I can't. The momentum is taking me. So when I get angry, it's like having momentum. So what you want to do is at the start, you can abstain from the things that are upsetting to you. Other exercises or other reps, memento mori. So think about the fact that you will die. Just think about the fact that you'll die today. That's a rep. Premeditatio malorum is another exercise, which is think about something bad that you're afraid of, but like imagine in detail what your life would be like if it happened. I used to get really anxious when I would give talks. And I had, my ex-girlfriend was like, yeah, but like, has anything ever bad actually ever happened after any of these talks? Like, is anything bad? And when I thought about that, I was like, oh, you're actually right. And so that's just this idea of just imagine, don't imagine everybody laughing at you because you screwed up. Imagine everybody laughs at you and then you wake up the next day. You know, how material different or worse is your life? Probably not, right? And if you think it is, maybe you need to do some other Stoic work. Another rep they do, and these are just all exercises you can pull out. Another rep is called the view from above, which is basically Stoicism is you talked about being atomistic. It's about often exploding your perspective out or zooming your perspective in, right? Like in the moment thinking what's up to me, it's a very small perspective, or in moments zooming your perspective out. And the view from above is something Marcus Aurelius says to do. So like imagine you're floating among the stars, looking down at the world. You know, how kind of insignificant do things seem? So it's basically the view, you know, people talk about, you know, will this matter to you in 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 years? Is this idea of when you're getting really stressed about something, look down on yourself like you're in the sky and it's like, I'm kind of maybe just adding more drama to this than I need to, or hopefully that's the way it's supposed to work. So those are some exercises. I gave that idea of being critical and intentional about how you, assent is a Stoic term, but just like what beliefs you're letting into your head, what you're thinking, your thoughts, being attentive to those. Abstaining from bad behavior, trying to remove yourself from, it would just be triggers, right? That get you in emotional states because the Stoics think you're not able to reason as well when you're in those states. And then considering bad things, considering the worst thing, basically that you will die, and considering a broader perspective. One last one, because now I'm getting warmed up to this, is amor fati, which I think is actually a Nietzsche line. I don't think the Stoics actually ever used it, but that's just the love of fate in Latin. And so that's the exercise of actually practicing not just acceptance, but love of something that's happened. So not just being resilient, but actually being like, okay, I'm going to practice actually being kind of enthusiastic and engaged with this. Yeah, so those are all examples of kind of reps you can practice. And the appeal to Stoicism, not the appeal, one of the appeals, is that it is something that is, I talk about this as like the Stoic tool belt. Like I just gave you the Stoic tool belt. Lots of people you can use that even if you're not a Stoic, those ideas, those exercises. There's a deeper level of axiology. There's a deeper level of value theory and what really matters in life below that. But those exercises work for anybody. Like the dichotomy of control. Yeah, when you're stressed out, just think, I'm just going to reduce my attention to what is up to me. I'm just going to work on just focusing on that. That is a rep you can practice, and that's helpful for anybody, not just Stoics.
I'm going to be like that lion in no time.
Blue eyes?
Yeah, with the blue eyes. Actually looks more like Brogan.
I could see it.
Yeah.
I kind of want to finish on death.
Yeah.
Here.
Cool.
Because this Marcus Aurelius quote, paraphrasing, but he says that death would be the most insignificant point in your life. Like that's the least important thing you will ever do is die. Am I getting that correct?
I'm not sure the part from Marcus Aurelius, but it sounds very right.
Yeah. So it's like I see this paradox in Buddhism a lot as well, of not fearing death, but then death kind of imbues your life with meaning. Mm-hmm. So there's this balance, I guess you could imagine striking, of just like theoretically, for your own experience, right? For what you will experience on Earth, you're never going to experience this like lack of consciousness. All you've ever known is existence. All you ever well known is existence, like by definition, right? Of existing. So I don't know what I'm on about here. I had it in my head like 5 minutes ago.
You think death is a bad thing? You think death is not insignificant? Is that the? Hot take, death is bad.
I don't think it's anything. I don't think it's like, I don't have a value judgment of death.
I think when you were talking about, like, imagine the worst thing happening to you, and I was imagining my own death, I was like, hell yeah, let's do it. Let's do it now.
I like the worse fates than death. Is that the libertarian line? What is that from, like, somewhere in the Constitution?
There are worse fates than death.
Yeah, I don't I'd rather stand free than
die on my
I'd rather
knees.
die standing than die on my knees.
Dying on my knees.
Or live on notes. I'd rather die standing than live on my knees. There are worse fates than death.
Yeah. And the knees part is implying you're giving the globalists a blowjob.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's much worse. That's much worse than I'd rather die a free man than.
Well, so the Stoic position on this, I mean, so the thing you said by Marcus Aurelius is probably something he said. It's also an Epicurean argument. The Epicurean argument was that you should, like, one of the Epicurean therapeutic strategies was they tackled the main things that make people sad and afraid, and one of the main things was death. So they made a bunch of arguments against death, or against the fear of death, and one of the main ones was that, you know, you didn't hate before you were born, so you're not going to hate being dead. It's like this lack of consciousness thing you were referring to. But one of the things that the Stoics are actually pro-suicide. I think the anti-suicide is quite a...
Oh! Whoa! They're pro-suicide?
Yeah, their suicide is always on the table. Yeah.
What? You hate them so instinctively because they just... How did you intuit this?
So you don't like suicide? Is that the...
His tagline is never kill yourself. It's not on the table. It's never an option.
Yeah,
just axiomatically, take it out.
That's my first principle. Is like suicide is just an impossibility.
That's what his entire moral and philosophical standpoint is built on.
Yeah, great. Well, then that's a problem. Yeah.
Why is it on the table?
So this Epictetus's phrase is the door is always open, because a constant counterexample is like, well, you know, if someone would say, well, people can't make you do a Stoic would say people can't make you do terrible things. And someone would say, yeah, but what if somebody like locked me up? What if somebody chained me up and, you know, or put a gun to my head and said, you know, kill this person or I'm going to kill you. And the Stoic argument is just, yeah, well, then you can just die, right? Like if you get chained up, you can just stop eating. You can just kill yourself. So they're basically the idea is that you're never, because the goal of a good life is virtue, there's nothing that ever forces you to be unvirtuous or to be vicious. And if you are in an actual terrible situation where you're forced to, their only choice is to be vicious, then you should just cease to live, right? And that's actually the responsible moral thing to do. And the example of this is Seneca. Seneca was the tutor to Nero. Nero was a terrible emperor in Rome. And Seneca was involved in a plot to assassinate Nero. You know, he was caught and he was asked to kill himself, and he killed himself instead of kind of, you know, maybe he would have still had to die anyway, but instead of, you know, begging for forgiveness or running away or doing something like this. Kind of also probably goes back to this idea of Socrates we talked about, right? Which is Socrates is that inspirational figure. The most talked about person in Epictetus' discourses is Socrates. The second most referenced person in Epictetus' discourse is Diogenes the Cynic. So you see that lineage. And Socrates was convicted of corrupting the youth. And he even talked about Socrates here. He's pretty badass. He basically he was convicted of corrupting the youth. And then in Athenian court, they give this they let the prosecutor and the defense propose the judgment or propose the punishment. And the prosecutor was like, I propose death. And him, instead of being like 10 years in jail, or I should really say that I'm sorry, Socrates is like, I propose that you honor me as an Olympic champion. He's like, that's what I think my punishment should be, is that you give me a bunch of free meals, you give me one of those parades. And so, yeah, it was kind of like an FU to this, what he saw as this corrupt system. And, you know, cause it's just like, yeah, people probably were like, damn, we really didn't want to kill you, but like, we can't give you that. And then people broke in and tried to break him out of jail. And he was like, no, I'm going to stay here. This was my sentence. I'm going to drink the poison and die. And so that's an example of, depends on your conception of your responsibility when you're unjustly convicted of something. But that was an example of Socrates, instead of being cowardly and choosing life at all costs, chose like a brave death. And that's something that the Stoics still idealize.
I'm going to, in the spirit of misapplying Stoicism to terrible terms, use that to justify killing myself now. Okay, I want to end. I just have one last question. I'm trying to be as pessimaxed and neurotypilled as possible. How would I live as non-stoically as I possibly could?
I mean, you guys already talked about it quite a bit, right? Like, I think you would.
Yeah, my only idea right now is I just want to care about things I can't control as much as possible, and put no effort into the things I can't
care about things you can't control as much as possible. Don't care about things you can control, or don't worry about them at all. Be incredibly afraid of death.
Okay.
Never consider any bad thing that's a necessary part of being a person, so that you're 100% surprised every time it happens.
Okay, psychotic delusion with every one of my interpersonal relationships and myself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Be incredibly myopic. Like, never consider your relationship with other people or your community or your world.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I would think, always act on your first impressions of things. So never consider anything deeper or apply any sort of standard of judgment or consideration.
That's such an awesome way to end it, because my first impression of Stoicism was that it was bad, and now I can just go off of that.
I'm picturing you like watching a pigeon get hit by a car and just like collapsing into a no! Oh, and then someone's like, "Are you all right?" And you're like, "Fuck you! Fuck you!"
Oh no!
Okay, that was good advice. The serious takeaway that I have of this is I'm going to do some of those reps.
Great.
Yeah.
We all should. And again, this is what I always end on when I talk about this. Socrates quote. I really love that. Like, I feel like you're both really engaged and plugged in and interested, but also like have maybe this gap in ancient Greek philosophy, which is understandable, but I get to be like, hey, there's some cool stuff here. Socrates' quote, very famous, is that the unexamined life is not worth living, right? So it goes back to that idea at the start, which is that it doesn't really matter if you're a Stoic or you're an Epicurean